Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on your Wednesday morning Rise and Shine. And this morning here, we're looking at a topic, chronic wasting disease in deer and elk. Chronic wasting disease in deer and elk. I'm talking about this current development. This is something that's been going on, but just want to shed a little light on this. And then I'll talk about this a short little note on this herb called cractum. So this is what we'll be talking about here as we talk about our natural health from Wednesday through Wednesday, or Wednesday from Wednesday to Wednesday. So thanks for joining me here. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today. Let us begin with a prayer. We thank you, O Lord, again for your love, the blessings that you continue to give to us, and the insights you give us how best to live and to maintain a good health. May you bless us, dear Lord, as we look at these things. We pray for Christ's sake. Amen. So again, we're looking at this important topic of the chronic wasting disease. But before I go into my main topic, or what I want to talk about with you here this morning, I want to share this thing about a herb that the FDA is moving into ban, and I guess they want to work with the DEA to ban this herb. And I've never used it before, but I've read about it in the past, and I know some people use the herb for getting off opiates and also for pain. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it here, and just something in the news that is more current event issue that's happening in the health world. And so this year is the herb is called cractum, is what is known, Kartom. It's known more commonly, and it's also known as catum, and it is Mitragina speciosa is the Latin name. It's a tropical evergreen tree in the coffee family, native to South Asia in the Indochina and Malaysia area, botanical region. Is indigenous to Thailand, I guess they don't say TH, Indonesia and Malaysia, Myanmar and Papua New Guinea, where it has been used in traditional medicine since at least the 19th century. Cractum has some opiate and stimulant-like properties. As of 2013, no clinical trials have been done to understand cractum's health effect, and it had no approved medical use. Some people take it for managing chronic pain, for treating opioid withdrawal symptoms, or more recently for recreational purposes. Onset of effects typically begins within 5 to 10 minutes and lasts 2 to 5 hours. Common minor side effects may include nausea, vomiting, constipation. More severe side effects may include seizure, addiction, psychosis. Other side effects may include high heart rate, blood pressure, trouble sleeping, and rarely liver toxicity. When used to stop, withdrawal may occur. With respiratory depression, decreased breathing is a major risk with all opiates. The medical literature is divided on whether it is a significant side effect of cractum, with some authorities not mentioning it and others emphasizing it. Deaths have occurred when cractum was present mixed with other substances. In the United States, there were 15 cractum related deaths between 2014 and 2016, although in none was cractum thought to be the sole factor. So what I'm going to read for you in the next article, after I do one more paragraph on that, is that what many observers and people who use the herb is saying is that it is not the sole factor, and so far this seems to be the case. As I say, I'm not promoting it or not promoting it. It's just something important for you to know, because when people have chronic pain, they try to find all kind of solutions that might not have the dangerous side effects that others may have. So here, cractum has been involved in deaths, but it is also mixed when it's used with other drugs. So it is not clear if it is it on its own that is causing these deaths, or if it is because of the combination with other drugs. Also, some people believe that it enhances other drugs or substances effect. And so this could be what is causing the deaths, the enhancement of the other substances. As of 2015, there were a growing international concern about a possible threat to public health from kratom use. In some jurisdictions, its sales and importation have been restricted, and a number of public health authorities have raised alerts. Sometimes the finished product is mixed into cocktails with other psychoactive drugs such as caffeine and codeine. And so one would understand that people take caffeine, codeine, and other type of drugs like that for its effect. So if something would boost it, then they're using it to boost it. And, that's a common practice amongst people who are regular recreational users of drugs. They're always looking for a bigger hit. So if something you can mix, it's like alcohol. You mix alcohol, you create a cocktail, and the cocktail become more powerful than the individual substances or liquids that makes up the cocktail. So I think it's a similar light. Now here I'm going to share with you an article from USA Today, and it is entitled "FDA Chief Warns About Kratom to Treat Opiate Addiction Will Seek More Regulatory Power." So citing 36 deaths, the Food and Drug Administration chief will warn consumers today not to use the herbal supplement kratom. Kratom, I think, is the proper way to ease opioid withdrawal, and announce plans to step its regulatory oversight to combat the opiate epidemic. The FDA public health advisory on kratom follows the DEA, or Department of the Drug Enforcement Administration, reversal or at least delay of plans to classify kratom as a controlled substance on the same level as heroin, LSD. Gottlieb says the FDA plans to work with the DEA to determine how kratom should be classified. Kratom, a plant grown naturally in countries including Thailand, Malaysia, is widely sold in smoke shops and other locations as a powder that can be used in tea to slow the effects of opiate withdrawal, but it has addictive properties of its own, FDA says. Public health advisory relates to the FDA mounting concern regarding risk associated with the use of kratom. So most naturally here, so the question often is it because the person is on opiates and they're trying to get off the opiates and they're dying from the withdrawals or the experience dealing with the opiate or taking opiates itself, or is it the kratom solely to be blamed for the results that follows, which is death? And most actually, if they do an autopsy, they would find in the person's bloodstream this herbal remedy, and so it is assumed, or they will find it probably on the person's stash of other drugs. So it would be assumed that this is what's happening. So anyhow, so they're moving to have regulatory oversight, more power over this drug. Continue reading here. The FDA says kratom carries similar risk of abuse, addiction, and in some cases death as opiates. It is also often used recreationally for its euphoric effects. Along with opiate withdrawal, kratom is also believed to relieve fatigue, pain, cough, and diarrhea. Anita Gupta, osteopathy anesthesiologist and licensed pharmacist, has expressed concern about an increase in the use of kratom among her chronic pain patients. Still, Jessica Bardolas of the American Osteopathy Association says many were dismayed to learn of the DEA's plan to classify the plant as a Schedule 1, they missed the T there, plant as a Schedule 1 substance, despite anecdotal and scientific evidence indicating kratom could be effective opiate alternative. Because kratom is largely regulated, you never know the real strength ingredient, or because it's unregulated, and how it prepared. So basically, what's happening, as you know, when you come on to supplementers of food, this whole idea of regulating it is not done inside of the United States, but it's done in places like Germany, and so and some European countries. So you're just buying it, but you don't know the full potency. You don't know if it's an extract, if it's strengthened, how it's being prepared. How it's being prepared. So because of this, they want to be able to put some FDA regulatory oversight over this product. So I want to share that with you this morning here as something that I've not used, and I know because of chronic pain, people are always looking for options that are not as dangerous as opiate, but are powerful enough to deal with the chronic pain that they're facing. Also, there's always people looking for something new and legal to use as recreational drugs. And this is something that the FDA is moving in. So is what the FDA doing good or bad? I'm not sure. There's always question because many of the people from the FDA also used to work for various different drug companies. And so it could be believed that probably they're just killing the competition because, as you know, the new guy that they want to put as head over the drug czar, he used to work for, I think, Pfizer or one of those big companies. So most naturally, if you get somebody in there that is supposed to be dealing with the opioid and drug addictions, and he himself used to work for the drug companies, he's probably going to be more, friendly towards solutions that keep lining the pocket of these major drug pushers or these major drug manufacturers. That's, I guess, the best way to say it. So this is what's happening there. So that's always an ongoing dilemma because the question is, as you know, in America and in the world over, many people have an idea that if it's a plant, it must be good. And anything that is made or is a plant is great. But they fail to realize that coca and poppy and marijuana and all these various different things are plants. And as plants, they have an addictive psychoactive properties, and the psychoactive properties are not well established of how to use them long term without damaging the brain. So the best way to do it is to feed the brain things that are going to make the brain not only heal itself but function best. So just wanted to put that out there as just a note for you to see how sometimes these things work. But we'll be hearing more about that as the FDA move in and they move in to control this substance or this plant. Now, I'm going to talk now about my main topic I want to talk about this morning here with you, which is chronic wasting disease, CWD, in deer and elk, or deers and elks. And this year, I'm going to be reading this little short article or short piece of this article just to kind of bring you up to date on what's going on. It's not a health article, but it's just something in here I want to point out to you to kind of move along with my topic. So this is again from USA Today, and it's a story about a Missouri girl, 14, thought she was shooting a deer when she pulled the trigger. So Springfield, Missouri, she saw the antler and a big brown body in the bushes, and with one shot from her rifle Saturday, Abby Wilson, 14, killed what she thought was a very large white-tailed buck. It wasn't. It was an elk. She called her dad, who was hunting nearby, and her dad realized it was an elk. And Tom Strother, Protection Regional Supervisor for the Missouri Department of Conservation, the dad called our agent in Boone County, Adam Doroff, and said, "We think we just shot an elk." Doroff said he was surprised to get the call and thought it probably wasn't an elk, noting that animal misidentification are very common. The dad sent me a photo to my phone, and it was very clear that yes, that's an elk, Doroff said. You don't expect to see something like that. I've learned to never say never. Missouri has no hunting season for elk, though MDC is growing a herd in southeast Missouri after reintroducing elk to their native habitat at Peck Ranch Conservation Area in 2011. Strother said the elk that Abby shot was more than 200 miles away from the Peck Ranch herd in an area between Halesville and Centralia. It took 5 men to load the elk into a truck, where MDC is doing a number of tests on the carcass. They are looking for a sign of chronic wasting disease, which elk has been known to carry, and a DNA test that might tell them where the elk came from. Our elk biologist wants some part to figure out where it may come from, Strother said. There are no reports of elk in this area. It was kind of a surprise to us. There was no evidence of any air tag or collar on this one. Strother said there's a ranch that has captive elks near Columbia in the west side of Boone County, but MDC has had no report of any of those animals escaping. So that's what's happening there. And then I'll just read the last paragraph of this article. The elk carcass is being held in a cooler, and the meat might be donated to needy family if it passes the CWD, which is a chronic wasting disease test. Strother said it's possible the elk antler might be used as an educational display to help hunters know the difference between a white-tailed deer and an elk. So if you had seen this article online, you would obviously note that most of the discussion was going on about why this young girl was hunting and not able to identify what she was shooting, because all she saw was a brown body and some antlers, and she thought it was a deer, and she fired away. Also, you might note, as the article stated, that it would have been a surprise because elk are not in that area per se, and so if she shot an elk, she probably would have never seen one before, other than probably on television or something of that sort. So she would not know what she was shooting. So anyhow, that's not our discussion here about hunting and shooting. That's good for them. What I want to talk to you here this morning about is about chronic wasting disease. And this is something that I've covered before. And it is something that is important for one to understand what is chronic wasting disease and how it affects the food population. Now, it's important to note that the healthiest meats that a person would partake of are animals that are not grown in pens and in cages and in captivity, but are animals that are normally classified as free range. So most people think the more free the animal to move around is, the healthier is going to be the meat, and that's logical. Same thing with human beings. A person that spends a lot of times on their couch watching television, and a person that spends a lot of time outdoors working and physical exercise and recreation is going to be physically more healthy, even if they're on the same diet. So that's obvious. So most actually, I'm not saying that it is not healthier when you have an animal that can run around and prance around and enjoy himself outdoor and get some fresh air in comparison to the animal that's locked in a building. But normally the idea is that if you have something that is free, it should be healthier. And I've said it here before, so I wanted to reemphasize this point that deers and other animals like that have been proven to have what they call mad deer disease, and also this thing which is chronic wasting disease, which to me is the same thing. And you'll see why in a second as I share some of this information with you. So this is about chronic wasting disease. CWD is a transmittable spongiform encephalopathy, which is TSE, of mule deer, white-tailed deer, elk, moose, and reindeer. So that means this could be in Santa's herd. As of 2016, CWD had only been found in members of the deer family, first recognized as a clinical wasting syndrome in 1967 in mule deer in the wildlife and research facilities in northern Colorado, USA. It was identified as TSE in 1978 and has spread for free-ranging and captive population in 23 states, U.S. states, and 2 Canadian provinces. CWD is identified by chronic weight loss leading to death. No relation is known between CWD and and any other TSE of animals or people. Although reports in the popular press have been made of humans being affected by CWD, a study at the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention suggests more epidemiological and laboratory studies are needed to monitor the possibility of such transmission. So there's been reports, but the CDC is saying basically that they need more time to study this thing out. So most actually, if I'm talking to you here, you know that in my mind I've come to a conclusion years ago that you don't need no more time for them to study it out. What you need to do while they're studying this disease out and to see if it's eating these dead carcasses is transmitting the disease to people, you could just go ahead and stop eating it. That's my suggestion here. And then when they figure it out, then at least they'll catch up with you and me. Because you read it here, it says the epidemiological study further concludes, as a precaution, hunters should avoid eating deer and elk tissue known to harbor CWD agent. So they're saying basically don't eat the tissues that are normally harbors the CWD disease, which is now the brain, spinal cord, eyes, spleen, tonsils, and lymph node. From areas where CWD has been identified, we'll cover those areas in a second. So notice the elk turned up in Missouri in an area that is not normally there. They're trying to reintroduce it. So it's going around. And what they normally say, and today they have this practice when they kill cattle, they try to avoid people getting or any contamination of the other meat parts by the brain, the spinal cord, the eyes, the spleen, the tonsils, the lymph. So this is important. All right. So they say don't eat it. So if they tested it and don't see it, they say, well, it's good to eat. More on that later. Most cases of CWD occurs in adult animals. The youngest animal diagnosed with natural CWD was 17 months. Keep that in mind. The disease is progressive and always fatal. Always fatal. The first signs are difficulty in movement. Now, everything I'm going to read to you from this paragraph is important for you to think about the disease, Alzheimer's disease, and most naturally, human variant of this disease, which is Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease. Alzheimer's, Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease are two diseases that if you look at the symptoms of chronic wasting disease, you will see that the symptoms are the same. Think about it. Something like Alzheimer's disease is the brain that is being wasted, the spinal column, because the person loses control of their nervous system. Same thing in the animal for CWD, mad deer, mad cow, mad all of these diseases. All the symptoms are the same. So here they are again. First signs of difficulty in movement. The most obvious and consistent clinical sign of CWD is weight loss over time. Behavioral change also occur in the majority of cases, including decreased interaction with other animals, listlessness, lowering of the head, tremors, repetitive walking in set pattern. So the person is walking back and forth, or the animal walking back and forth, and nervousness. So if you think about those things, you see excessive salivation and grinding of the teeth also are observed. Most deers show increased drinking and urination, and increased drinking and salivation may contribute to spread of the disease, because the disease can spread literally through fluid from the mouth. The agent responsible for CWD and other TSE, such as scrapie and bovine spongiform encephalopathy, is mad cow, which is mad cow disease. So this is the same disease as really mad cow disease. We're talking about bovine spongiform. Is PRNP, or which is a prine, which is highly conserved among mammals and has been found and sequenced in deers. It is a prine an abnormal form of a normal protein known as prion protein, most commonly found in central nervous system CNS, and is capable of spreading to the peripheral nervous system, thus infecting meat and muscle of deer and elk. So I don't want you to miss that. The prion that you normally hear about that is in the brain is a misfolded protein that normally destroys the brain and make the brain look like Swiss cheese when it's done with it. This protein is primarily in the central nervous system, so the brain, the spine, and it will be caught up in the lymph node and other places like that because the body is trying to isolate it and keep it from spreading. But as they test the animals, they found in smaller proportions, it's also in the meat and muscle. So whatever type of meat form or parts of the body and muscle of these animals. So although they will say, well, if it's not in the brain or in the spine, it's probably okay. It's not. Notice also they said they found it in deers and elks, and they found it in animals as young as 17 months. Because what they did when mad cow outbreak happened in Britain, what America went in and did is lower the age for when they kill the animals. So the cows are being killed at a younger age here in America so that the disease doesn't get developed. So think about it, a person is 50 that start developing Alzheimer's disease. The disease might not take its full course until the person is 65, 70. It doesn't mean that at 50, if you kill the person or the person died and they did an autopsy, they wouldn't find beginning stages. It's just you wouldn't find as much damage. So it's important to note that says the animals, even at 17 months, already has the disease. A little bit over a year, bam, they have the disease already. So what they did, they lowered the age so the disease is not rampant or not doing such massive damage that is observable from the outside. But if you cut the carcass and you inspect the brain and you inspect the various other muscle tissues, you'll find the beginning stages. That's important because it's the same. The way they hide it and say, oh, America doesn't have a problem with mad cow is by killing the animals younger. But you see the results in the people. And you say, well, I'm seeing a similar result in the people. So what's going on there? So we keep reading here. So it's the abnormal PRP, which is a prion, infect the host animal by promoting conversion of normal cellular protein, prion protein, to the abnormal prion form. The buildup of the PRPD, which is the abnormal prion form in the brain, is associated with widespread neurodegeneration. So this is where it's coming from. Mad cow or prion in the brain of animals, prion in the brain of elks, prion in the brain of human beings is the same prion. If the prion can transmit even through the saliva, then that tells you if it can go through the saliva, how much more can it be transmitted when a person eat the meat. So we continue here. Reading. Diagnosis is based on post-mortem examination and testing. Examination of the dead body is not definitive as many animals die early in the course of the disease and conditions found are not specific. General signs of poor health and aspiration, pneumonia, which may be actual cause of death, are common. On microscopic examination, lesions of CWD in the central nervous system resemble those of TSE. In addition, scientists use immunohistochemistry to test brain, lymph, and neuroendocrine tissue for the presence of abnormal prion protein is diagnosed. Positive finding are considered a gold standard or a certain standard that they use to find a positive finding. The origin and mode of transmission of the prion cause CWD is unknown, but recent research indicate that prions can be excreted by deer and elk and are transmitted by eating grass grown in contaminated soil. Animals born in captivity and those born in the wild have been affected with the disease. Based on epidemiology, transmission of CWD, which is chronic wasting condition, is thought to be a lateral from animal to animal. Maternal transmission may occur, although it appears to be relatively unimportant in maintaining epidemic. An infected deer saliva is able to spread the CWD prion. Exposure between animals is associated with shared food and water source contaminated with CWD prion sheds by diseased deer. So if you see what's going on there, if you ever read anything much about the prion, which is the misfolded protein, that protein that is basically diseased, when the protein, if a person who has the same misfolded protein and they go into operation, they have shown that in order to kill the protein and not make the protein go from one person operation to the next person operation, they cannot just say sterilize the operating equipment or the tools that they were using for do the operation, and they can't just burn it in the furnace. They have to do both. They have to take the equipment, sterilize it, so wash it, sterilize it down, then take it and dry it in an oven to kill the prion. That's how powerful the prion is. So people would say, well, if I take my meat and say this deer or this elk or this cow has the mixed folded prion, and I take the meat and I put it in my oven and I bake it at 350 degrees, this piece of beef or elk, wouldn't that get rid of the prion? Well, they have shown that it doesn't work because the prion, I think, dies somewhere above 600 degrees. Nobody baked their food like that. The other important factor is that muscle meat, beef, elk, deer, if it's overcooked, it becomes very dry and very string-like, very hard to eat. So all the time people eat, especially like beef, rare. They want to eat it where the blood is still there, still kind of alive, so to speak. It's a dead carcass, but it still has some life or some, moisture in it. But by doing that so internally, not on the external where they burn it and singe it, but on the internal, the animal itself or the carcass has the prion that is definitely, if how many 100 degrees is not going to damage it. Just singeing it and eating it rare or raw almost, it's not going to really get rid of it, because remember, this prion is so contagious that the deer or the elk will drink in a water source and another deer elk comes behind drinking that same water source and catch the disease. That's powerful. That's just like hepatitis C or some of these diseases where standing water can preserve the disease for a while before it's transmitted to another animal. So it's important to know. So if somebody say, well, okay, it can't be caught from the animals to us. Well, remember, they're mammals, we're mammals. This is how we can catch our diseases. It's easier. So just keep that in mind. And so the food source can be a major form of exposing the animals and to disease. The disease was first identified in 1967 and in closed herds of captive mule deer in contiguous portions of northeastern Colorado. In 1980, the disease was determined to be a TSE. It was first identified in wild elks and mules in 1981 in Colorado and Wyoming, and farm elk in 1997. So just think about the areas in the Midwest area, the areas that are, you would think, would be less industrialized, and what's going on there. In May 2001, CWD was also found in free-range deer in southwestern corner of Nebraska, adjacent to Colorado and Wyoming, and later in additional areas in West Nebraska, the limited area of northern Colorado, southern Wyoming, and western Nebraska, in which free-range deer, moose, and or elk positive for CWD have been found in is referred to as the endemic area. So this is the main area that you find this type of there that is wasting away. The area in 2006 has expanded to 6 states, including parts of eastern Utah, southwestern South Dakota, northeastern Kansas. Also, areas not contiguous to the endemic area, areas in central Utah and central Nebraska, as have been found. The limits of the affected area are not well defined, since the disease is at a low incidence and the amount of sampling may not be adequate to detect it. In 2002, CWD was detected in wild deers in south central Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and in an isolated area in southern New Mexico. In 2005, it was found in wild white-tailed deers in New York and in Hampshire County, West Virginia. So think about it. So the endemic area is in the Midwest, but yet even in New York State, you're finding this CWD. In 2008, the first confirmed case of CWD in Michigan was discovered in an infected deer on an enclosed deer breeding facility. It is also found in Canadian provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. In February 2011, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources reported the first confirmed case of the disease in that state. The affected animal was a white-tailed deer killed by a hunter. So this is where now, as you say, as I've been saying, that people say, well, these are the animals running wild. And I say, think about it. The animals running wild, they have no discernment to know what they're eating and how they're getting disease. They're animals. They go and drink at a toxic waste dump and get some weirdness in them. You don't know. And then you eat it, and you eat in that sickness and all that chemical. Also here, CWD has been identifying farm elks and deer herds in a number of states and in 2 Canadian provinces. The first positive farm elk herd in the United States was detected in 1997 in South Dakota. Since then, the additional positive elk herd and farm white-tailed deer farm white-tailed deer and tailed deer herd have been found in South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, Kansas, Minnesota, Montana, Wisconsin, New York. As of fall 2006, a few more here of where it's found because I want to show you how widespread this is. 4 positive elk herd in Colorado and positive white-tailed deer herd in Wisconsin remained under state quarantine. All of the other herds have been depopulated, so they destroy them, or have been slaughtered and tested. And the quarantine has been lifted from one herd that underwent rigorous surveillance with no further evidence of disease. CWD also has been found in farm elk in Canada, province of Saskatchewan and Alberta. A retrospective study has shown that mule deer exported from Denver to the Toronto Zoo in 1980 was affected. In June 2015, the disease was detected in a male white-tailed deer breeding in Medina County, Texas. State officials also euthanized 34 deers in an effort to contain possible outbreak. A few more here. It says the species have been affected with CWD, including elk, mule deer, white-tailed deer, black-tailed deer, moose. Other ruminant species, including wild ruminants and domestic cattle, sheep, goats, have been housed in wildlife facility in direct or indirect contact with CWD affected deer and elk with no evidence of disease transmission. However, experimental transmission of CWD into other ruminants by intracranial and inoculation does result in disease, suggesting only a weak molecular species barrier exists. Research is ongoing in further exploring the possibility of transmission with CWD in other species. So look what's going on there. They have said that there's even not much barrier. So you could get a goat that has it. And I've known people who rear or raise goat. and they'll say literally, and this is recently I'm talking about, they'll say literally, the goats, they'll get up, goats are just prancing around, jumping around, being goats, and then the next morning they're dead. Just overnight, just sick, die. I remember those goats are being raised to sales, for sales to people, special people, or probably from the Caribbean or the Middle East, just dead, just like that. So imagine if that day when they killed them, the day before they died, they decide to slaughter them. As seldom the person is eating a deer that the next day they would have been dead. And this is why when you look at what chronic wasting disease is, and you look at what people are, you look at a lot of people around you, you say, well, are they having chronic wasting disease? Because you can see the symptoms in the people. On location, again, one last thing on location. By April 2016, CWD, chronic wasting disease, has been found in captive animals in South Korea. The disease arrived there with live elks that were imported for farming in the late 1990s. So we're talking about something that is all over the place. In Norway and other places, I just cut and then I move on. So remember, this disease is a disease similar in the family of bovine spongiform. BSE, which is what we will call mad cow disease, mad deer disease, all the mad diseases that make people mad. The common known as mad cow disease is a transmittable spongiform encephalopathy or fatal neurodegenerative disease in cattle that may be passed to humans who have eaten infected flesh. So it's well established that human beings who eat the infected flesh of these cattle will come down with the similar neurodegenerative disease here. So it's passed from human being to cattle. So the BSE causes spongiform degeneration of the brain and spinal cord. BSE has long incubation period of 2.5 to 5 years, usually affecting adult cattle at a peak age onset of 4 to 5 years. BSE is caused by misfolded protein prion. So pause here again. So remember I mentioned, and I'll say it again just for your thinking, and you could do your own research into this. What they did, they tried to kill the cattle younger. Because remember, from the time the animal comes down with disease or catch the disease to the time the disease is fully incubated and ready to go, and you can see the clear signs, it's 2.5 years to 5 years. Normally, it's more in the range of 4 to 5 years. So if you kill a cattle at 3 or 4 years old, you're more likely to kill a healthy cattle. That means if you take a video camera, you go on to where they're slaughtering the cattle, and the cattle is 3 or 4 years old, it's going to be great because the animal is going to go in looking healthy. Give it another year, and the animals will look like a person that has, has the similar the same type of disease, a chronic wasting disease. The person's wasting away, losing their brain and their spinal column, basically functions. Important to note. In the United Kingdom, more than 180,000 cattle were affected and 4.4 million slaughtered during the eradication program. In France, the country worst affected overall, over 300,000 cases were identified. Although most were not recorded at the time, the disease may be most frequently transmitted to humans by eating food contaminated with brain, spinal cord, digestive tract of infected carcasses. However, the infectious agent, although most highly concentrated in nervous tissue, can be found in virtually all tissue throughout the body, including blood. So keep that in mind, because when this broke years back, the primary thing they say, they're going to stop processing the brain and the spinal cord or the spinal column, that thing that stretched the back of the cow. Well, what happened there? Notice it says here, it is all over the cow, because one thing is flowing around the cow and around you and me that goes into our brain primarily is blood. Our body uses up, depends on the source you're reading, anywhere from 20-something to 30-something% or more. Some people believe 30 to 40 of the blood that flows in the body and the nutrients. So if the blood is infected with this protein, the whole tissue, the whole body is going to be infected. So a person might say, well, I eat cows that are normally, less than 4 years old. Sure, it's just like, yeah, great. But the problem is all the tissue, even if you're not eating tissue. Then as you know, in processing the animal, how do you protect the rest of the body from being infected, as I say, because the blood flows through the whole body? It might not be as concentrated in the sirloin steak part of the body of the cow, but it is in it, and that's the point. And you eat that burger, you're eating your pain and suffering, and that's what's important to note. The animals are diseased. Okay, so the blood, when it is being transmitted to the human, it is known as new variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, VCJD. And by June 2014, it had killed 174 people in the United Kingdom and 54 elsewhere, primarily in Western Europe. Between 460,000 to 483,000 BSE infected animals have entered the food chain before control on high-risk offals were introduced in 1989. So keep that in mind. They say only 177. I personally believe it's more, because again, the disease is similar to Alzheimer's disease. All the side effects are the manifestation of Alzheimer's disease is the same disease. It's just humans are wasting away. You call it Alzheimer's disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. The animals wasting away, you call it chronic wasting disease, CWD. It's the same thing. All the same symptoms. It's come from protein, the same misfolded protein, the same source. But CDC said, well, don't worry about it. We're still doing more study. And I'm like, why are they doing more study? But anyhow, they suggest that it's best not to eat animals that are known to be contaminated. I'm just saying, don't eat animals altogether. Don't wait until the study comes out. By then, you might be dead. A British and Irish inquiry in BSE concluded that the epizootic was caused by cattle, which are normally herbivores, being fed the remains of other cattle in the form of meat and bone meal, a protein supplement in concentrated feed. Since dairy calves are generally fed concentrated feed after they are weaned, they usually develop the disease more often than beef. Now keep that in mind, because they're saying they pump more of this protein into the dairy calves, and so they end up normally developing the disease faster. Remember, when you're drinking milk, you're drinking liquid meat. It is basically liquid meat. That's the only way for me to describe it. And it's basically you drink it because of the protein. That's the main idea of drinking liquid meat. You're drinking it because you're drinking some liquid, protein. There's some blood in there. There's some other things from the calf in there or the cow in there. So when you're drinking this, that's what you're consuming, and that's the reality of the matter. You gotta be clear on what you're consuming. But these animals develop the mad cow faster, and you're just taking it. You know the going. A mother will eat a certain food, and the result will be seen within hours when the child drinks the milk of the mother. Anyhow, the cause of BSE may be from the contamination of the MBM from the sheep with scrapie, and that were processed in the same slaughterhouse. The epidemic was probably accelerated by the recycling of infected bovine tissue prior to the recognition of BSE. The origin of the disease, it remains unknown. The infectious agent is distinctive to the high temperature at which it remains viable over 600 Celsius. So 600 Celsius, you remember I said that earlier, that the prion can withstand 600 Celsius. It can go into an oven, you burn it 600 degrees and it's still alive. Up to 600 degrees, I should say. So you think about it. When we bake, we normally bake at 350. Normally that's when you use your oven. If you want to broil something, probably 400, 450. And that's high. And yet this thing can withstand 600 degrees Celsius. A contributing factor, and 1112 degrees Fahrenheit. So I should put those two numbers there. 600 Celsius, 1102 degrees Fahrenheit is still alive. A contributory factor was the feeding of infected protein supplement to very young calves. All right. So notice here they're saying that the problem was they were feeding mammals to mammals. I'm saying it a different way so you can get what's going on here. The contributing factor for scrapie in sheep and mad cow disease in cattle and mad deer disease in deer. The contributing factor, they said the main factor for this is that they were taking animals and feeding it to animals. They would ground up the dead cow or the dead sheep. Who knows what it died from, what the cause of the death. So you see a dead carcass in the field, you take it, you grind it up, and you make it into a concentrated meal, and then you feed it to the sheep. You mix it with other stuff, and you feed it to make the sheep grow. Because remember, the idea is, animals are protein, they need protein, which is not the original concept from the Bible. The concept from the Bible was we eat plants, and we convert the plants into protein. So anyhow, they took these sheep and cows and stuff like that, grind it up, whatever cancer or whatever thing it died from, who cares, grind it up, feed it to the animals again. So what's the difference between you taking, say, for instance, a piece of beef, which is a mammal, doesn't have the intelligence that you and I have, but it's a flesh, and you grind it up into burgers or whatever, into ground beef, and you feed it to yourself? Wouldn't that create the disease just the same way? Because if you follow the Bible says that when we were created not to eat ground up animals, but we were created to eat plants. So the disease is primarily from the source of mammals eating mammals. So if it's clearly established scientifically that the problem was feeding mammals, feeding sheep, just imagine a little sheep in the field, and I can't make the noise it makes. And then a day later, the sheep mother dies, or father dies. They take that sheep that's dead, you grind it up, dry it somehow or whatever, somehow, make it into a feed, and feed that sheep it. Sheep, their mother, their father. Then the sheep comes out with some weird disease. Well, what's the surprise there? It's some weird behavior. But we as human beings do the same thing. We basically say it's like we're starving and we need to survive on a starvation diet. Because to me, that's what a starvation diet is. You're sacrificing the animals to live. But you and I don't need to sacrifice animals to live. We can live just fine on the diet that was given to man originally in the Garden of Eden, which is a plant-based diet. And when we do this, we'll find that our disease reduced by about tenfold. That's the number there that I can stick with. Because what it is that we're not feeding disease carcass to human beings that already have a weakness in their body. It is not necessary. The animals are filled with cancers. They're filled with all kind of tumors. They're filled with all kind of weirdness from the various different chemicals that feed them, and even the free-range ones are feeding chemicals. Our land is polluted with all kind of toxic waste. And what we do, we kill these animals, and we make them into pâtés, we make them into filet mignon, we make them into slivers of meat, and we throw it on our plate and we eat it. And we're literally, for the most part, feeding mammals to mammals, because most of what we eat as animals to be eaten are mammals. Now, I know people eat chicken and fish. They're not mammals per se, but most of what we eat are what happened to the cows and the sheep. They were feeding cows and sheep to cows and sheep. And you wouldn't think a person who would drink blood, because it's transmittable by blood, you wouldn't think a person would drink the blood of human beings per se, or eat the flesh of human beings would remain healthy for too long. Because as you know, even in blood transfusion, you have a higher risk of receiving the disease of the person that the blood came from. Also, in where you do surgeries where you put a graft of a skin or take an organ, you put an organ transplant in, that the body rejects it. The body doesn't do well with other flesh from other even human beings. Even a child in the mother's womb, the Lord has made it that the mother is able to produce certain chemicals so that the body is not destroyed, or the child is not destroyed by the immune system. So getting up every day and eating dead carcasses might be a great idea, so to speak. I'm just saying, in essence, might be a great idea if you're about to starve and die and there's no plan to eat. But if you have no emergency, there is nothing that you're dying if you don't eat anything. Probably it's a great idea to go ahead and leave the animals alone, leave their weird diseases alone, and fight the disease that you have. Because again, I wouldn't eat you because you're diseased. You have all kind of weaknesses you're struggling with. It's a possibility if I eat you, who is flesh and mammal, I'll pick up your diseases. So I'll leave you alone. And I go eat the plants and go find the most natural, chemical-free plants I can find, and more nutritious plants I can find. I don't have to worry about disease. So I've said it over and over again. It is not so much because we don't want to see, we believe that we should care for the animals, but that is not our main reason why we don't eat animals. The main reason we don't eat animals is to avoid the diseases, is to avoid the suffering and pain that the animal dead carcass is going to put us through. Yes, we care about animals, that, animals shouldn't suffer and all that, but not to the level of most people, because they don't understand what they're doing. They're thinking that the main idea is that animals shouldn't suffer. That's a good and altruistic, virtuous aim. But a greater aim is that the human being doesn't suffer as much. There's too much suffering that we see that can be laid at the feet of eating diseased animal that are simple disease. And if you look at it as the Bible says in Romans chapter 8, verse 22, it says, "For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now." When we look at the creation, it is groaning and travailing. You look at these animals, I see these deers all the time. I see them eating on my front lawn and in my backyard and stuff like that, or running from some hunter that's trying to shoot them around here. And I look at them and I'm thinking, these things, they're cute, but they're diseased. I can just look at them, they look diseased. Just like I can look at a human being and I can sort of tell what kind of disease they have by just looking at them. It's the same way I can look at the animals. Why would I want to eat those diseased deers? They look sick and they have mad deer disease. That's why they're always twitching and looking crazy. So important. Somebody you see that's running from your car, you think they're mentally ill. Why would they just run in front of my car like that? They hear me coming and they see me blowing my horns. But I just always think when they do that, I think, poor thing, they're diseased. And we need to hope that the Lord come and get rid of them. As I've read to you multiple times, because of wickedness in the land, the animals are suffering. I believe all of these things are something that human being did, because they say they don't know the reason why the CWD, the chronic wasting disease, was created, why prion get misshapen. I believe it's a wickedness that somebody did along the way, experimenting with some of these animals and created this disease, or things that we do to the nature that poisons it. So for that reason, I always read Hosea chapter 4 verse 3 that says, "Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish, and the beasts of the field with the fowls of the heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea shall be taken away." So we see this constant dying off of animals. We see they have to keep culling the birds. We see how much dying off of various different fishes, because the animals are diseased, because we are sinners and we have damaged the nature, damaged these animals, and then we turn around and eat these diseased animals. We notice again the word languish mean it's a long-term sickness, it's a long-term suffering. These animals suffer for years before they die, and then die these weird diseases like these chronic wasting diseases, mad cow disease, mad deer disease, crepey, all kind of weird stuff. And it's important for us not to suffer these diseases. It's better to stop eating the meat, go on a plant-based diet, start taking natural remedies or herbs, start exercising, drinking water, get proper sleep, and give your body, immune system, an opportunity to fix your body so that you don't die from languishing disease and you can live a healthy life. This is my encouragement for you here. You try this and you'll see that it works. You'll be healthier for it, and you'll be thankful that you reduce your aging and your pains and aches by eating a very healthy plant-based diet, as healthy as you can get it. Let's pray. We thank you, Lord, again for the blessings of this day. We thank you for your word. We thank you, dear Lord, for giving us the mind and the willingness not only to learn, but also to make the right choices, that we do not suffer as our brethren, our people, the people that live amongst us who suffer because they insist, dear Lord, in eating these disease carcasses. May you bless us, dear Lord, and thank you for the wisdom that you give us, that we can observe, dear Father, these strange developments in our country and in the world. May you bless us, dear Lord, and give us the self-control by thy Spirit to abstain from these fleshly food. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So thanks again for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning, where we should talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.